What's up? What is up? What a banging song. Boom, do, 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 boom, boom, boom. Oh my god, this song slaps, but I'm just gonna get live chat up. I can see what's going on. G'day, Cameron Skellums. We'll wait a tiny bit. I'm not gonna wait too long. I'm probably gonna have a tea break, that's about it. We'll probably be going for at least 2 hours, maybe, if I read quick enough. Honestly, better than Zombie Nation, honestly. Should we get started now? I think we should, because we don't want to be going for too long. starting off with Adelaide. Let's go up. You can't see this list, but I can. So let's get started. Grantley Phil, Daryl Hart, Eddie Hocking, Rod Jameson, Andrew Jarman, John Klug, Scott Lee, Bruce Linda, Bruce Lindsay, David Marshall, Rodney Maynard, Chris McDermott, Tony McGuinness, Peter McIntyre, Romano Negri, Nigel Smart, Darren Smith, Robbie Thompson. G'day, Arch Takes Dubs. Simon Tregenza, Tom Warhurst, Alan Bartlett, Scott Hodges, Michael Murphy, Bruce Abernethy, Danny Hughes, Stephen Rowe, Mark Bickley, Mark Micken, Clayton Lamb, Matthew Liptuk, David Brown, Sean Tasker, Matthew Kelly, Wayne Wiedemann, Sean Roon, Andrew Pays, Paul Patterson, Ben Hart, Anthony Ingerson, Randall Bone, Tony Modra, Jonathan Ross, Stephen Schwert, Brenton Sanderson, Adam Saliba, David Pittman, Paul Rouvray, Greg Anderson, Chris Groom, Matthew Rob Brand, Mark Rasciuto, Mark Viscar, Matthew Powell, Stuart Wigney, Tony Hall, Brett Chalmers, Shane Tondry, Sean Wellman, Peter Turner, Josh Mail, Matthew Kluzik, Martin McKinnon, Nick Pesh, Matthew Connell, Jason McCartney, Andrew McLeod, Tyson Edwards, Troy Bond, Peter Cavan, Shane Ellen, Darren Jarman, Kim Costa, Matthew Collins, Kane Johnson, Peter Vardy, Ashley Fernie. G'day Pendlebury, how are ya? Simon Goodwin, Brett James, Aaron Keating, Chad Rintle, Barry Stanfield, Brent Williams, Tim Cook, Trent Ormond Allen, Tom Gilligan, Clay Sampson, Nathan Bassett, Lance Piccio, Piccuan, Mark Stevens, James Thiessen, Andrew Eccles, Ian Downsborough, Sajai Cook, Ian Perry, Ben Marsh, Lyndon Evans, Brody Atkinson, Brett Burton, David Gallagher, Lucas Herbert, Brian Bink, Darryl Wintle, Matthew Golding, Tyson Stengline, Dean Howard, Ken McGregor, James Byrne, Matthew Clark, Andrew Crowell, Scott Welsh, Justin Sikalala, Robert Shirley, Rhett Biglands, Ricky O'Loughlin, Michael Doughty, Evan Hewitt, Chris Laddams, Matthew Shire, Hayden Skipworth, Matthew Bode, Stuart Bone, Adam Richardson, James Gallagher, Ryan Fitzgerald, Graham John Cockburn, Nelson, Daniel Schill, Chris Massey, Martin Matner, Brent Riley, Wayne Carey, Jason Tawney, Trent Henschel, Ronnie Burns, James Begley, Ben Rutten, Jacob Schubach, Scott Stevens, Ben Hudson, Luke Jericho, Nathan Bock, Fergus Watts, Scott Thompson, Nathan Van Berlo, Chris Knights, Bernie Vince, Jason Perlizia, Ivan Marek, Richard Douglas, Jonathan Griffin, John Hinge, Bryce Campbell, Nick Gill, John Meeson, David McKay, Brad Symes, Kurt Tippett, Jaron Jackie, James Seller, Andy Otten, Brad Moran, Patrick Dangerfield, Mike Cook, Jared Petrenko, Taylor Walker, Sean McKernan, Brody Martin, Rory Sloane, Tony Armstrong, Will Young, Chris Smith, Phil Davis, Ricky Anderson, Matthew Jane, Jack Gunston, Brodie Smith, Richard Tambling, Luke Thompson, Matthew Wright, Sam Jacobs, Ian Callanan, Daniel Talia, Aidan Riley, Tom Lynch, Sam Kerridge, Sam Shaw, Jared Lyons, Josh Jenkins, Tim McIntyre, Luke Brown, Lewis Johnston, Brad Crouch, Rory Laird, Mitch Grigg, G'day Go to AFL, Kyle Hardigan, Eddie Betts, James Podsadley, Matt Crouch, Charlie Cameron, Cameron Ellis Yeoman, Kyle Cheney, Jake Kelly, Jake Lever, Riley Knight, Rory Atkins, Mitch McGovern, Wayne Malira, Paul Seedsman, Riley O'Brien, Curtly Hampton, Troy Menzel, Jordan Gallucci, Hugh Greenwood, Jonathan Beach, Alex Keith, Tom Duday, Darcy Fogarty, Bryce Gibbs, Lachlan Murphy, Miles Polholke, Sam Gibson, Patrick Wilson, Elliot Himmelberg, Chase Jones, Ben Davis, Tyson Stengel, Billy Frampton, Fisher McAsey, Ben Crocker, Ben Keys, Ned McHenry, Will Hamill, Shane McAdam, Andrew McPherson, Kieran Strachan, Harry Schonberg, Lachlan Scholl, Jordan Butts, Sam Berry, Mitch Hinge, James Rowe, Nick Murray, Jackson Haitley, Riley Thilthorpe, Ronan O'Connor, Josh Worrell, Luke Pedler, Braden Cook, Lachlan Gollan, Jordan Dawson, Josh Rochelle, Jake Saligo, and Patrick Parnell, and that is Adelaide done. That is Adelaide done. This is just Adelaide, mind you. I'm going to get Brisbane's up. We're going to start with Fitzroy, because we're doing from 1897. I'm being serious, hashtag Stubbs. Definitely. Ivan Astrick, Tom Banks, Jack Dalton, Pat Discremies, Jim Grace, Mick Grace, Pat Hickey, Ern Jenkins, Chris Kiernan, Percy Kimberley, Roger Lamley, Dick McCabe. Nah, yeah, I would want to do something like this. Samuel McMichael, Bill McSpearn, Dan Moriarty, Jeff Moriarty, Arch Muirhead, Jerry Nolan, Ted Staniland, Jim Whelan, Tim Curran, Fred Nomans, Bert Rappaport, Alex Sloan, Matty Noonan, Stan Reed, Bill Cleary, Bert Sharp, Joe Kerrigan, Charlie Cameron, ironic, Mick Peppard, Henry Yeager, Alex Davidson, Hugh McEwen, Herb Nolan, Harry James, Kelly Robertson, Bill Dalton, Eddie Droane, Charles Jenkins, Bill Potter, Tom Tullich, Arthur Davidson, Johnny Power, Charlie Doherty, Alf McDuggan, Harry Clark, George Shaw, Bill Thompson, Jack Days, Charlie Folletta, Tom Nolan, Tammy Beauchamp, Bob Hay, Jack Maluke. We're into the 1900s now. Lou Barker, Gerald Brosnan, Archibald Middleton, Joe Grace, David McGrath, Gordon Ross, Bertie Lull, Jim Paternoster, Matt Paternoster, Jim Sharp, Percy Trotter, Alf Bartlett, Bob Smith, Alf Wilkinson, Frank Hintz, Frank Brophy, George Hutchinson, Henry Alder, Charlie Naismith, Wally Naismith, Mark Shea, George Cruise, Bill McCarthy, Arthur Gilligan, Sam Baker, Teddy Best, Herbert Milne, Jack Trahey, Fred Howard, Albie McDonald, Bill Griffiths, Charlie Martin, Bill Walker, Les Millis, Alf Sharp, Joe Johnson, Edgar Neen, Percy Sheehan, Bill Kelly, Paddy Shea, Hedley Tompkins, Fred Lethbridge, Gilbert Barker, Jack McDonough, Les Sharp, Sid Billings, Jack Holt, Sonny Douglas, George Elliott, Barclay Bales, Sam Davidson, Ridley Plaisted, Frank Abbott, Jim Nealon, Roop Bradley, Joe Yulden, Lou Jacobs, Jimmy Luff, Bill Blacklock, Jack Cooper, Jack Dawson, Harold McLennan, Norm McLennan, Charlie Owen, Herb Byrne, Wally Johnson, Alf Appleton, Mick Mornane, George McWilliam, Tom Sadlier, Jack Edgley, Arthur Trelaw, Billy Dick, Val Duncan, Bill Franklin, George Holden, Jim Thorpe, Bill Campbell, Charlie Taylor, Ned Richardson, Bill Dinsmore, Fred Forbes, Tom Norton, George Lambert, Clive Morrison, Arthur Newbound, Percy Peratt, Bill Payne, Jim Lynch, Arthur Ferguson, George Pike, Norm Richardson, Dave Earsman, Bernie Brophy, Bob Briggs, and Sid O'Neill, Ted Farrell, Bert Lean, Jim Porter, Fred Scott, Fred Kirkwood, Bill Marchbank, Joe Brophy, Len Richardson, Bill Drew, Andy Patterson, Bob Rahilly, Herman Bartlett, George Featherston, Teddy Buste, Ernie Everett, Jack Furness, Frank Lamont, Tom Mologney, Danny Murphy, Eric Watson, Artie Freeman, Cliff Hutton, Fred Markby, George Shaw, Tom McCluskey, Tom Reardon, Thornton Clark, Fred Bamford, Clary Dahl, Bill Moxon, Charlie Dow, Bruce Campbell, Charlie McMillan, Charlie Norris, Albie Sheehan, Arthur Francis, Jimmy Freak, Tom Willoughby, Billy Holmes, Tom Stronix, Hugh Heron, Percy Heron, Harry Collins, Bill Laver, Tom Wells, Jack MacArthur, Bill Scott, Johnny Downs, George King, Roy Millen, Jim Toohey Sr., Artie Harrison, Ted McDonald, Don Monroe, Orm Fowler, Charlie Wells, Thomas Heaney, Jack Lachlan, Billy Wilson, Henry Anderson, Chris Lethbridge, Roland Lynch, Jim Martin, Arthur Jones, Paddy Abbott, Bob Tealsdale, George Patterson, Stan Rogerson, Dave Crone, Bill Stone, Harry Smith, Clive Fergie, Tom Lowry, Bert O'D, Teddy Purcell, Horry Jenkins, Bill Gabau, Frank Valentine, Frank O'Keefe, Charlie Byrne, Bob King, Fred Moore, Bill Reeves, Maury Barrett, Harold Walker, Norm Barker, Bill Byrne, Frank Strawbridge, Jim Atkinson, Harry Powditch, Alex Kennedy. Is my mic okay? My mic all good? I don't know. I think it's fine. There we go. Let's continue. Harry Powditch, Alex Kennedy, Jack O'Brien, Carl Keller, Len Wigraff, Doug Bennett, Gordon Rattray, Billy Billett, Larry Featherston, Stan Milan, Bill Thorpe, Cyril Zimmer, Wally Beckwith, Clary Sherry, Les Gibbow, Les Boyne, Norm Byron, Vic Nankervis, George Gow, Bob Scott, Joe Shortell, Sid Smith, Bob Merrick, Bert Taylor, George Muir, Fred Keys, Johnny Carter, Gordon McCracken, Len Gale, Bill Milgavry, Fred Williams, Fred Chanter, Dave G. McGrath, Alf Boyce, Fred Chapman, Don Hutchins, Harold Carter, Ern Elliott, Joe Scales, George Welsh, Harry Watson, Norm Lugg, Alf Key, Arnold Beetzel, Bill Hicks, Norm Cockram, Tommy Corrigan, Steve Donnellan, Hector McNeil, Percy Chalmers, Goldie Collins, John Hamilton, Les Warren, Alwyn Dulitz, Arch Dickens, Jim Tarbotton, Ernie Watson, Les Bryan, Ern Mitchell, Jack Scales, Arthur Batchelor, Fred Beeson, Ryan Cosgrave, Charlie Deslands, Jack Moriarty, Bill Adams, Norm Collins, Doug Parks, Roy Snell, Len May, Bill Turner, Bobby Walker, George Gordon, Mike McMahon, Tom Hickey, Charlie Chapman, Frank Costigan, Jack O'Rourke, Reg Smith, Jack Millen, Stuart McLatchy, Eric Reachman, Eric Chatfield, David Coughlin, Bill Curtis, Gordon Hellwig, Doug Anderson, Jack Cashman, Bert Kerry, Reg Knipe, Vic Truman, Bob Allen, Lockie Wood, Ed Ryan, John Fitzgerald, Cyril Kemp, Fonz Hayes, Luke Brown, Lou Bowles, Roy Milne, Willis Reeve, Bert White, Claude Tuvey. Am I reading everyone in AFL history? Benjo Bonjo? Yes, I am. Steve Foley, John Hayes, Bill Williams, Bill Donald, George Gibbs, Jack Lean, George Waterhouse, Tasman Roberts, Eddie Schenk, Jim Shanahan, Doug Ringrose, Alan Johnston, Charlie McKinley, Jack Vale, Ned Kick, Frank Gibson, Robbie Gale, Tom Meehan, Henry Powell, Tommy. By the way, Fitzroy's coming after Adelaide because then we're going to do Brisbane because it's technically still Brisbane, but well, I'll just Robbie Gale, Tom Meehan, Henry Powell, Tommy Williams, Jack Buckley, Alex Byrne, Percy Ellis, Cecil Kerr, Paul Killen, Tom Lawrenson, Colin McKay, Colin Niven, Norm Harris, Neville Huggins, Tommy Pratt, Ivan Sharp, Norm Stott. I'll get my mic's glitching. Hold on. Is that better? Hello? Hello? Better? Oh, my computer is so hot. Ivan Sharp, Norm Stott, Arthur Cockram, Percy Roberts, Norm Beckham, Tom McCaffrey, Roy Finlayson, Roy Henry, Jim Watson, Johnny Davis, Les Scotland, Ted Shields, Alan Fisher, Frank Pierce, Bob Hall, Len Hook, Like, you have no idea. Sorry. You have no idea how hot the bottom of my laptop is. I gotta close some stuff. Give me a sec. I can. Now, next one. Frank Beggs, Colin Benham, Fred Davies, Con Hogan, Gerald McKenzie, Harry Chalice, Jack Williams, Wilfred Smallhorn, Frank Raymond, Keen Vivers, Keith Fleming, Ken Mackey, Roy Dougal, Lindsay Fricker, Hayden Bunton Sr., Lionel Hasty, Austin Hogan, Les Pryor, Ray Niven, Harry Verdon, Denny Dowd, Jack Rocci, Leo Bird, Tom Harrington, Harold Hartney, Roy Hearn, Horry Dawson, Ian Fleming, Fred Hines, Stan Jones, Frank Fleming, Charlie Holmes, Frank Curcio, Mal McRae, Douglas Nichols, Laurie Plunkett, Jack Sexton, Len Stott, Harold Boyd, Ron Sharpter, George Chapman, Phil Lane, Ernie Burns, Joe McKinley, Lou Sharp, Stan Castles, Ray Collar, John Ryan, Wally Gray, Alf Taggart, Wally Coates, Jack Cleary, Tommy Wells, Mickey Sharp, Alf Callick, Jock Cordner, Frank Donnellan, Dan Murray, Frank O'Rourke, Seth Parry, Wally Mitchell, Leslie Watt, Keith Marshall, Cleet Turner, Arthur Williams, Bruce Sharp, Keith Giffen, Claude Conaway, Jack Kidd, Bill Bedford, Rex Byrne, Len Pye, Bill Shenford, Jim Steigenberger, Brian Goodhart, Charles Cameron, Alan Thompson, Maury Hearn, Bob Moore, Noel Fisher, Dennis Ryan, Bert Beard, Frank Seymour, Mel Rudd, Richie Saunders, Leo Maines, Ron Latham, Don Quartermain, Ted Griffin, Jim Tuis Jr., Alf Neeson, Wally O'Brien, Len Blackley, Keith McPhee, Norm Andrews, Cole Crawford, Arthur Holt, Tom Ledwidge, Russell McGuinness, Bob McLellan, Jack McConchy, Leo Monaghan, Bill Warren, Peter Connell, Terry McKinn, John Kadush, Eric Clark, Ken Reed, Charlie O'Leary, Joe O'Meara, Les Amos, Bob Fitzsimmons, Jock McKenzie, Arthur Edwards, Bruce Calverley, Tom Ree, Alan White, Les Hewson, Laurie Morgan, Bernie Treweek, Tommy Lasky, Bill Bunworth, Laurie Mutimer, Audley Gillespie Jones, Mick Hewson, Bill Lowenthal, Vic Carroll, Dick Noble, Charlie Bartling, Tom Buthaway, Len Smith, Reg Trigg, Charlie Young, Alan Nyland, Neil Boyd, Jeff Daly, Fred Backway, Arch Knott, Glenn Denning, Bert Minnie, Jack Norman, Fred Hewson, Gordon Dennis, Peter Revel, Bob Sayers, Harry Jacobs, Jack Wegner, Arthur Hart, Len Catton, Alf Hurley, Ingy Norman, Noel Price, Claude Curtin, Jim Taggart, Keith Stackpole, Alan Fields, Norm Hillard, Ted Besford, Lou Martin, and Mick Keary. So far, we're up to 1940 for Fitzroy. We've gone through 40 years worth of players so far. Oh my god. I have to read 100 years worth of players nearly every time. Alf Clay, Ken Fox, Ted Hill, Bob Merrick, Chadrash James, Lindsay McNamara, Des Calverley, Keith Forbes, Sid McGain, Stan Wright, Bert Clay, Walter Dudley, Lindsay Dyring, Alan Ruthven, Alan Moore, Ken Sire, Albert Collier, Les Hill, Ivor Clay, Eddie Hart, Colin Cox, Harold Powell, Jeff Nichols, Bill Jones, Bob Robinson, Bruce Bridges, Leon Gemmell, Doug Oliphant, Len Toyne, George Watson, Jim Hallahan, Reg Hammond, Vin Doherty, Jack Grant, Angie Moller, Leo Hicks, Bernie McVeigh, Arthur O'Brien, Billy Hall, George Hoskins, Wally Miller, Les Powell, Max Rippon, Stan Dawson, Harold Winberg, Merv Brooks, Doug Byrne, Ralph Patman, Jack Lancaster, Bob McHenry, Ted Tompkins, Bernie Fife, Monty Horan, Adrian Hearn, Dennis Hall, Bill Spokes, Billy Walsh, Wally Bristow, Laurie Bickerton, Charlie Linney, Jack Harrow, Noel Jarvis, Norm Johnstone, Jack Simons, Laurie Crouch, Jack Collins, Jim Kettle, Peter Dorwood, Ed White, Don Hammond, Harold Schillinglaw, Jim Brown, Alan McLaughlin, Merv Smith, Vic Chanter, Norm Reedy, Reg Nichols, Bob Miller, Stan Vandersloot, Alan Broadway, Bill Stephen, Don Chip, George Coates, Heinz Ton, Dick Kennedy, Neil O'Reilly, Jack Toohey, Lou Owens, Kevin Hart, Ron Kinder, Ken Ross, Keith Williams, Wall Alexander, Eric Moore, Jerry Sire, Gordon Brunin, Bill Charlson, Alan Gale, Jack Gaffney, Ron Simpson, Norm Smith, Barry Walters, Ray Donnellan, Jack Strader, Don Furness, Eddie Goodgar, Ron Bickley, Ron Wright, and Reg Milburn. We've hit the 1950s. I just want to take a break. I'm going to take like a minute break. I'm going to check on Siren's stream, then we're going to get straight back into it. Holy shit. I'm just looking at Siren's stream.
New Zealand are going to the grand final, there's no doubt about it now.
Yeah, I'm just taking a break. Right, let's. Oh my god. Let's get back into it, shall we? We're at 1950s for Fitzroy, not Brisbane Fitzroy. Alan Sorrell, Ron Dunn, Lance Watson, Arthur Fitt, Don Hart, Jack Gervasoni, Fred Anderson, Tom McGee, Greg Laurie, Noel Carroll, Bob Roberts, Neville Broderick, Tony Angarello, Colin Davey, Ray Millington, Kevin Wright, George Ashman, Kevin Blizzard, John Harding, Joe Hickey, Jack McGregor, Vin Williams, Joe Murphy, Kevin Tame, Arnie Bench, Tom Meehan, Reg Renwick, Graham Spooner, Kevin Darrigan, Jim Cusick, Ern Tricky, John Ford, Keith Webb, Bob Henderson, Graham Knight, Charlie Wainhope, Ron Morgan, Brian Pert, Ken Chambers, John Bartlett, Ray Davies, Gordon Proudfoot, Owen Abrahams, Rod Vernon, Ron Harvey, Jeff Patterson, James Chapman, Leo Smith, Eddie Tucker, Reg Carr, Bob Collins, Toby Elder, Alan Anson, Kevin Murray, Wally Clark, Ron Smith, Bobby Wilson, John Charles, Laurie Jarman, Bill Smith, Matt Cunningham, Max Galpin, Brian Lane, Graham McKenzie, Ken Seymour, Ian Aston, Graham Gotch, Graham Campbell, Colin Dodd, Ivan Smith, Dave Chivers, Jack Clancy, John Hutchinson, John Shelton, Ken Grimley, Stan Whitmore, Barry Roberts, Keith Rochow, Bruno Sawsey, Ken James, Ray Slocum, Alan Chip, Brian Barkley, Tom Broadbent, Phil Rochow, Keith Weigard, Les Houston Jr., Gordon Dixon, Jim Brockman, Brookman, Keith Bromwich, Colin McNeil, Barry Piggott, Alan Lynch, Jeff Hill, Les Russell, Alan Wilson, Russell Crowe, Bruce McMaster Smith, Stuart Duncan, John Powell, John Embry, Brian Wicks, John Hayes, John Carmody, David Sykes, Ian Powell, Colin Bond, Brian Clemens, Bill Stevens, Wayne Eastman, John Barhan, Jeff Elliott, Graham Klein, Max Myers, Bill O'Kane, Norm Brown, Ian McRae, Jim Reniff, Bob Beatty, Colin Sleep, Brian Beers, what a name, Bob Easterway, Gary Lazarus, Brett Pollock, Brian Williams, Alan Anderson, Doug Hellings, Stan Haag, Barry Rippon, Joe Dixon, Kevin Ellis, Ron Fry, Brian Carroll, Ted Lovett, Jeff Doubleday, Tony Hurst, Barry Fitzgerald, Barry Sadler, Terry O'Mara, Bill Storer, Graham Gonanon, David McKenzie, Ralph Rogerson, Colin McRae, John Newnham, Eric Viner, Kevin Mitchell, Ross King, Alan Quaife, Graham Ramshaw, Graham Calverley, Bob Lynch, Daryl Peoples, John Booth, Lance Bean, Brian Hepper, Jim Kemp, Frank Johnson, Peter Wood, Ray Calverley, Brandon Hackwell, Dennis Houston, Terry Brady, Bob Hayton, Peter Williams, John O'Keefe, Max Cole, Bob Carroll, Mike Andrews, Peter Corcoran, Colin Hobbs, Paul O'Brien, Trevor Dawson, Harry Corbett, Russell Cromartie, Bernie Drury, Kingsley Ellis, Trevor McGregor, Kevin Oakley, Kevin Parker, Cease Reinberger, Alex Rusuklik, George Carey, Rod Cobain, Paul Hodgson, Dennis Aspinall, Vern Drake, John Bennison, Ross Enbom, John Murphy, Gary Evels, David Wall, Noel Zunneberg, Barry Knight, Gavin Smith, Mike Hallahan, Dick Telford, Andrew Kuka, Daryl Herod, Barry McKenzie, Barry Padley, Bill Walford, Ross Parker, Hugh Worrell, John Atkinson, Jack Austin, David Rhodes, Doug Searle, Graham Shearer, Norm Dare, Harold Martin, Shane Malloy, Bruce Baker, Lee Robertson, Bill Sykes, Harvey Merrigan, Peter Ellis, Bob Hodgkin, Peter Waitman, Paul Shanahan, Robert Ireland. Into the 1970s. Alan Thompson, Warwick Irwin, John Ducksworth, Laurie Bennett, Graham Renwick, Ray Salt, Trevor Lloyd, Laurie Richards, Lyle Skinner, Gary Wilson, Jack Newton, Renato Serafini, Ian Mikulich, Glenn Robertson, Jim Christo, Ray Brain, John Formosa, Mark Amos, Jeff Austin, Greg Booth, Jerry Noonan, David McMahon, Kevin O'Keefe, Alan Sinclair, Chris Smith, Colin Cruz, Karen Hayes, Andrew Lucas, Dean Farnham, Ian Miller, Neville Taylor, Dan Harrington, Don Whitford, Rod Carter, Wayne Linton, Graham Weatherly, Rod Appleton, Peter Rusuklik, Robert Shepherd, Graham Allen, Ian McGuinness, John Lorenzini, Jeff Clinton, John Lewis, Lex Dwyer, John Christo, Ron Alexander, Bob Beecroft, Brian Brown, Gary Chapman, Leon Goonan, Max George, Grant Fowler, Tim Godfrey, Neil McLeod, Greg Park, Peter Brown, Chris Hansen, Peter Johnston, Khalif Van, Shane Gilmore, Ross Hodges, Laurie Serafini, Wayne Duke, Mick Conlon, Alan Holmes, Glenn Ward, Graham Bucks, John Fraser, Gerald McCarthy, Grant Laurie, John Blair, Noel McGavin, Bernie Quinlan, Peter Keys, Robert Walls, Reno Preto, Malcolm Bramley, Kevin Higgins, Keith McLeod, Max Richardson, Michael Poynton, Leon Harris. I'm just going to go plug my phone in. There we go. All fixed. Okay, let's get back to the 1980s. Let's go now. Darryl Cox, Philip Early, Lee McConnon, Len Thompson, Craig Brady, Rod Lewis, Ross Thornton, Bruce Chambers, David Rankin, John Rantal, Mick Gilmore, Frank Marchesani, Larry Watson, Les Parrish, Glenn Coleman, Andrew Veal, Peter Foster, Jeff Everett, Graham Hinchin, Lee Murnane, Matt Rendell, Terry O'Neill, Scott Clayton, Lee Carlson, Des Herbert, John Casson, Peter Francis, Mark Eves, Michael Coates, Brad Gotch, Gary Pert, Paul Roos, Andrew Merriweather, Jan Smith, Richard Osborne, Grant O'Reilly, Gary Sidebottom, Brett Grimley, Bill Loken, Michael Reeves, Michael Nettlefold, Mark Scott, Doug Barwick, Dean Turner, Graham Williamson, Craig McGrath, Tom Pekin, Peter Burke, Jamie Cooper, Kevin Taylor, Bernie Harris, Graham Osborne, Andrew Cross, Darren Murphy, Paul Tilly, Tony Spaspolos, Gary Keane, Shane Hallas, Scott McIver, Philip Knight, Grant Thomas, Michael Gibson, David Crutchfield, Ross Lyon, John Blakey, Michael Gale, Dwayne Rowe, Murray Brown, Jim Wind, Chris Stacey, Peter McCormack, David Mitchell, Mark Dwyer, Brendan Ryan, Stuart Cameron, Darren Bolden, Matthew Armstrong, Chris Duffy, Darren Kapler, Brett Stevens, Ken Hinckley, Keith Thomas, Mark Trewella, Michael Roberts, Darren Handley, Alan Sidebottom, Tom Carafa, Paul McLean, Jamie Shaw, Christopher Taylor, Robert Bolson, David Stroper, Terry Board, John Ironmonger, Alistair Lynch, Darren Luttitz, Andrew Brockhurst, Paul Broderick, Stephen Newman, Carl Delena, Brad Edwards, Wally Matera, Brendan McCormack, Kevin Catton, Tony Woods, Peter Burke, Darren Wielden, Jason Baldwin, Dean Lupson, Roger Delaney, Dale Kickett, Chris Waterson, Mark Aythorne, Matthew Dundas, Robert Cummings, Jason Taylor, Mark Bunn, Andrew Johnston, Darren Collins, Nick Beardsley, Matthew Burke, Joe McCormack, Brad Davis, Brenton Clabe, David O'Connell, Shane Stevenson, Jamie Elliott, Frank Bizzotto, Dean Harding, David Noble, Peter Caven, Justin McGrath, Stephen Paxman, David Donato, Darren Wilkinson, Jamie Bond, Paul Abbott, Jeremy Gard, Paul Morrish, Marcus Seacamp, Gavin Excel, Dale Fleming, Chris Barrett, Brad Boyd, Peter Sartori, David Johnston, Ashley Matthews, Michael Dunstan, Mark Zanotti, James Manson, John McCarthy, Danny Morton, Simon Hawking, Anthony McGregor, Darren Payne, Tommy Kavanagh, David Bain, Trent Cummings, Jeff Hogg, Kieran Spawn, Stephen Stretch, John Barker, Chris Johnson, Jared Malloy, Matthew Dent, Nick Mitchell, Rowan Wharf, Brett Cook, Nigel Palfreyman, Simon Atkins, Brett Chandler, Doug Hawkins, Wayne Lamb, Matthew Manfield, Martin Pike, Andrew Cavedon, Darren Holmes, Peter Bird, Adam McCarthy, Anthony Mellington, John Rambotis, Jeff Bruce, Peter Doyle, Marty Worry, Scott Bamford, Brad Cassidy, Mick Dwyer, Matthew Primus, Nick Carter, Shane Clayton, Brent Bruin, Jason Ramsey, and Robert McMahon. And that is the end of the Fitzroy list. 2 clubs down. G'day, Shannon. Oh my god. Oh my god. I don't know how long that individual thing took. How long did that take? Oh, that took too long. We're an hour in already. So, you know what? I've got to go have tea. I'll be back in like 10 minutes. Chat amongst yourselves.
Angela Carlson here, and when I was younger, my skin still fit and I was brand new to the dating scene. I needed different people on different nights to keep me busy. Melissa to take me to the movies, Rachel to take me dancing, and Carol for some, let's face it, fairly average picnics. But as my youth departed, like my self-controlled buffet table, I realized I didn't need anyone else to eat a pizza in my pajamas with, just me, boo-boo.
Love no fuss, love now finance. Personal loans with no fees and none of the bank.
Credit and approval criteria. Terms and conditions apply. Australian credit licence number 425142.
The fun flavour of a cocktail with the refreshing taste of a Smirnoff Seltzer. Introducing the new Smirnoff Seltzer Spicy Margarita and Watermelon Margarita. The perfect blend of Smirnoff vodka, sparkling water and bold, zesty, all-natural flavours. With low sugar, 1.4 standard drinks and 107 calories per serve, viva la flavour with Smirnoff Seltzer. Tap the banner to try Spicy Margarita and Watermelon Margarita today. Drink responsibly.
Smoking mad Buddha. Pizza, pizza.
Insufficient funds. That can't be right. Gym fee, music subscription, streaming, and dinner out, drinks out, lunch out, dinner out, drinks. Ooh, yeah, it really adds up. Yeah, okay, that's all me.
Wondering where it all goes? Budget tools in the Westpac app can help you make informed choices about what to spend on or save for next. Click or tap the banner to find out how you can get Westpac backed. Read the T's and C's before making a decision. Minimum operating systems apply.
The fun flavour of a cocktail with the refreshing taste of a Smirnoff Seltzer. Introducing the new Smirnoff Seltzer Spicy Margarita and Watermelon Margarita. The perfect blend of Smirnoff vodka, sparkling water, and bold, zesty, all-natural flavours. With low sugar, 1.4 standard drinks and 107 calories per serve, viva la flavour with Smirnoff Seltzer. Tap the banner to try Spicy Margarita and Watermelon Margarita today. Drink responsibly.
Sorry that took so long, chat. Sorry. Sorry that took so long. That shouldn't have taken that long. But I'm back. Let's continue reading out the names. Yeah! Let's go to Brisbane Bears. Okay, we're going to start reading now. Peter Banfield, Matthew Campbell, Dale Dixon, Jim Edmund, John Fidge, Brad Hardy, Bernie Harris, Neil Hine, Michael McCarthy. I don't know why I keep losing subs. Mark Micken, Cameron O'Brien, David O'Keefe, Brent Phillips, Jeff Rains, Steve Reynoldson, Mark Richardson, Mark Roberts, Phil Walsh, Chris Waterson, Mark Williams, Darryl Cox, Gary Shaw, Frank Dunnell, Stephen Williams, Mark Buckley, Rick Norman, Tony Beckett, Ben Harris, Peter Smith, Neil Gagan, Rod McPherson, Alan Giffard, Adam Garton, Darren Carlson, Chris Stacey, Craig Evans, Michael Gibson, Ken Judge, Mark Withers, Stuart Glascott, Jamie Dersma, Warwick Capper, Rodney Eade, Michael Kennedy, Scott McIver, Roger Merritt, Robert Mace, Andrew Taylor, Matthew Simpson, Tony Lynn, Rod Lester Smith, David Bain, John Gasteff, Alex Zinchenko, Martin Leslie, Simon Hose, Lachlan Sim, Marcus Ashcroft, Chris Sullivan, Mark Zanotti, Kevin Catton, Brad Edwards, Sean Hart, Brad Rowe, Gavin Keane, Matthew Kennedy, Richard Umbers, Peter Davidson, Jonathan Solomon, David Wan, Ray Windsor, David Cameron, Richard Champion, Troy Clark, Peter Curran, Shane Hamilton, Michael McLean, Jason Miller, David Ogg, Danny Noonan, Matthew Ryan, Lawrence Shackey, Shane Stremple, Peter Worsfold, Craig Potter, Corey Bell, Rob Dixon, Simon Lurs, Matthew Armott, Ian Kidgel, Colin Alexander, John Hutton, Rod Owen, Nigel Palfreyman, Daryl White, Stephen McLucky, Ashley Green, Brendan Retzlaff, Heath Shepherd, Russell Jeffrey, Matthew Rendell, Michael Voss, Adam Karanaya. That's no good. Nathan Buckley, Nathan Chapman, Matthew Clark, Adrian Fletcher, Justin Lepich, Fabian Francis, Michael Murphy, Paul Pios, Dean Scott, Paul Spargo, Brendan McCormack, Danny Craven, Martin Hefferman, Damien Burke, John Parker, Brad Pierce, Andrew Buse, Craig Lambert, Gilbert McAdam, Chris Scott, Troy Lerman, Craig Starcevich, Nigel Lappin, Alistair Lynch, Rudy Frigo, Andrew Gowers, Ross Lyon, Craig McRae, Stephen Lawrence, Jason Ackermanis, Sean Corcoran, Shane Hodges, Trent Bartlett, Brent Green, Danny Dickfoss, Troy Johnson, Tristan Lynch, Clark Keating, Ben Robbins, and Daniel Bradshaw. We have to count the players who didn't, or who didn't play a game. So Scott Adams, Michael Agnello, Adam Ahern, Glenn Bartlett, Darren Barch, Cameron Bennett, Peter Bennett, Andrew Bishop, Campbell Black, Terry Broad, David Brown, Julian Burton, Ashley Byrne, Luke Chambers, Stephen Connolly, Andrew Gowling, David Greenhill, Chris Gertz, Andrew Harrison, John Henry, Brian Hinckley, Andrew Jarman, Darren Jarman, Gerard Jess, Jason Jones, Simon Kenny, John Klug, David Kupsch, Adam Ladbrook, Aaron Lord, Travis Martin Bainon, Chris McDermott, Colin McDonald, Darren Mead, Paul Mifka, Trent Mills, Tony Painter, Glenn Reeves, Damian Ryan, David Ryan, Brian Sheriff, Tim Sherman, Craig Somerville, Doug Smart, Roger Smith, Brian Stanilaus, Dean Strouch, Michael Templeton, Nick Trask, Ben Thomas, Sean Valenta, Brett Voss, Julian Waite, Matthew Waters, Adam Williamson, Joe Wilson, Derek Worth, David Whitey, and Peter White. Moving on to the Brisbane Let's get it up. One second. Here we go. Marcus Ashcroft, Richard Champion, Matthew Clark, Danny Dickfoss, Adrian Fletcher, Andrew Gowers, Sean Hart, Chris Johnson, Clark Keating, Matthew Kennedy, Nigel Lappin, Justin Lepich, Alistair Lynch, Tristan Lynch, Scott McIver, Michael McLean, Jared Malloy, Ben Robbins, Dion Scott, Michael Voss, Darryl White, Scott Bamford, Andrew Buse, Craig Lambert, Jason Ackermanis, Craig McRae, Nathan Chapman, Brett Voss, John Barker, Chris Scott, Nick Carter, Shane Clayton, Brent Green, Daniel Bradshaw, Brad Boyd, Nick Trask, Stephen Lawrence, Trent Bartlett, Simon Black, Brad Scott, Shane O'Brien, Luke Power, Marcus Picken, Bo McDonald, Rory Hilton, Tim Notting, Derek Worth, Adam Huskis, David Calthorpe, Martin McKinnon, Des Headland, Craig Bolton, Stephen Carey, Michael Martin, Shannon Rosca, Jonathan Brown, Aaron Shattock, Damien Cupido, Trent Noble, Nathan Clark, Mal Michael, Martin Pike, Richard Hadley, Jamie Charman, Robert Copeland, Ashley McGrath, Dylan McLaren, Shane Morrison, Darren Bradshaw, Blake Carosella, Jared Brennan, Luke Weller, Jason Graham, Anthony Corey, Jed Adcock, Daniel Pratt, Joel McDonald, Michael Rischitelli, Troy Selwood, Tom Logan, Daniel Merritt, Jaden Attar, Justin Sherman, Cameron Wood, Matthew Moody. Oh, g'day Menza. Lane Spanderman, Josh Drummond, Lee Ricewick, I don't know. Travis Baird, Mitch Clark, Ben Fixter, Scott Harding, Ran Harper, Wade Mills, Cheney Stiller, Jason Rowe, Paul Patford. Scott Harding, Ran Hooper, Wade Mills, Cheney Stiller, Jason Rowe, Joel Patfull, Marty Pask, Marcus Allen, Colm Begley, Chris Smith, Albert Proud, Daniel Dusfer, Will Hamill, Matthew Leuenberger, Travis Johnstone, Lockie Henderson, James Polkinghorne, James Hawksley, Tom Collier, Brad Dalziel, Scott Clouston, Pierce Hanley, Daniel Rich, Sam Sheldon, Matt Austin, Aaron Cornelius, Jack Redden, Tom Rockcliffe, Todd Banfield, Amon Buchanan, Brendan Favola, Matt Maguire, Andrew Rains, Brent Staker, Jesse O'Brien, Ryan Harwood, Xavier Clark, Clay Beams, Rowan Buick, Ryan Lester, Brock McCauley, Jared Polek, Bryce Retzlaff, Josh Green, Mitch Golby, Patrick Carnazis, Niall McKeever, Josh Dyson, Ben Hudson, Billy Longer, Jack Crisp, Dane Zorko, Elliot Yeo, Stephen Wrigley, Jordan Lyle, Brent Maloney, Stephen Martin, Sam Hayes, Sam Doherty, Marco Paparoni, Justin Clark, Sam Michael, James Aish, Lewis Taylor, Michael Close, Trent West, Tom Cutler, Jackson Payne, Nick Robertson, Darcy Gardner, Luke McGaughan, Zach O'Brien, Daniel McStay, Jonathan Freeman, Jordan Burke, Dane Beams, Alan Christensen, Jaden McGrath, Mitch Robinson, Harris Andrews, Liam Dawson, Hugh Beasley, Billy Evans, Ryan Bastanak, Tom Bell, Josh Shackey, Josh Walker, Ben Keys, Reese Matheson, Jared Jansen, Eric Hipwood, Matthew Hamilman, Ruben William, Archie Smith, Josh Clayton, Jake Barrett, Jack Frost, Jared Berry, Hugh McCluggage, Cedric Cox, Alex Witherden, Jacob Allison, Sam Skinner, Charlie Cameron, Luke Hodge, Cam Rayner, Zach Bailey, Oscar McInerney, Matty Eagles, Brandon Starcevich, Jared Lyons, Lincoln McCarthy, Lockie Neal, Noah Ainsworth, Mitch Hinge, Marcus Adams, Devin Robertson, Callum Archie, Tom Berry, Grant Birchall, Cam Ellis Yeoman, Connor Belendon, Jack Payne, Tom Fullerton, Keaton Coleman, Joe Danaher, Harry Sharp, Jackson Pryor, James Madden, Nakia Cockatoo, Darcy Fort, Kai Lohman, James Tunstall, Carter Michael, and Darcy Wilmot. That is the Brisbane Lions done.
Playlist to relax, chill, and unwind.
I think.
Listen now on Spotify.
God. How long have we been streaming for? We've been streaming for an hour and 28 minutes. There's too many players, man. It's too many. So many. Okay, I'm going to charge my phone. No, not my phone. I'm going to put my laptop on charge and we'll continue. So I'll go put that on charge. I won't be able to read chat, but that's better. There we go. Bill Ahern, Jimmy Atkin, Bob Armstrong, Tom Blake, Otto Buck, Bob Cameron, Bill Casey, Arthur Cummins, Henry Dunn, Brooke Hanna, Ted Hefferman, George Johnstone, Henry McPetrie, Wally Ocock, Joe Patton, Jack Reedy, Tom Sweetman, Ernie Walton, Bill Ware. I just want to take one break. Remember Bill Ware. still were. Bill Woodhouse, Sam Chapman, Harry Giles, Harry Hayward, Albie Patterson, Peter Williams, Chick Reese, Jim Caffrey, Jim Lyons, Harry H. Morgan, Bobby Walsh, Henry Crane, Jack Frost, Jack Roberts, Oscar Manchester, Bill Patterson, Sam Reed, Herbie Lowenthal, Jim H. Goonan, Billy Arnott, Fred Barlow, Charlie Brown, Len Morrison, Tommy O'Day, Jim Pender, Bill Sharkey, George Ward, Charlie Curtis, Mick Pender, Des Meadowcroft, Dan Pender, Tommy Kinman, Jim Coucher, Alf Moore, Herman Dorman, Mick Donaghy, Bill Churchyard, George Young, Dick Stewart, Les Vernon, Jim Balharry, Pat Considine, Jack Douglas, Harry Allender, Joe Archer, George Cowell, Alf Herndon, Bobadil Hooper, Bill McNamara, Henry McShane, Billy Monagle, Will Stuckey, Bob Bird, Dennis Lanigan, Arthur Thompson, Dick Walker, Artie McSpearin, Harry Lewis, Dick Gorsuch, Bill Collins, Harry Thompson, Harry Evans, Jack Gilbert, and Victor Rapp. That is the 1800s done. 1900s. Fred Elliott, Bill Lewis, Gerald O'Dwyer, Wally Powell, Harry Rigby, Charlie Rowland, Joe Sullivan, Peter Campbell, Joe Marr, Bill Strickland, Charlie Ross, Charlie Oliver, Ned Bennett, Jim Matthews, Charlie Mapleston, Harry Daniel, Dick Hart, Jim Loriot, Paddy Noonan, Bill Petit, Harry Pye, Charles Raff, Jack Gardner. We have a Jack Gardner. Jimmy Robinson, Charlie Stewart, George Cornelius, Rhoda Smith, Harry Powell, Frank Gomez. One second. Jimmy Robinson, Charlie Stewart, George Cornelius, Rhoda Smith, Harry Powell, Frank Gomez. One second. Sorry, my mum just wanted me to get my lunchbox ready for school tomorrow. Jack Gardner, Jimmy Robinson, Charles Stewart, George Cornelius, Rhoda McDonald, Harry Powell, Frank Gomez, Charlie Shunk, George McGann, Simon Roberts, Alex Barlow, Frank Field, Bill Dodds, Billy Spears, Jack Todd, Henry Crisfield, Joe McShane, Tom Watson, Jim McFarlane, Archie Snell, George Wickens, Rob Dashwood, Tom Fox, Paddy Lee, Charlie Charlie Tough, Chris Ryan, Fred Scott, Gordon Ross, Jim Opie, Barney Lazarus, Jim Martin, Freddie Weber, Herb Hainsworth, George Topping, Andy Dougal, Charlie O'Connor, Wal McKenzie, Pat McNulty, Sam Stibey, Jim Flynn, Arthur Ford, Bob Jacobson, Billy Leeds, Albert Trim, Mick Grace, Billy Orr, George Bruce, Frank Heinz, Matt Crow, Alf Go. Skipper, do you know how to fix live streaming? I don't know. I'm at Carlton so far. Billy Orr, George. Charlie O'Connor, Wal McKenzie, Pat McNulty, Sam Stivey, Jim Flynn, Arthur Ford, Bob Jacobson, Billy Leeds, Albert Trim, Mick Grace, Billy Orr, George Bruce, Frank Hintz, Matt Crow, Alf Guff, Norm Hogg, Bert Lithgow, Alex Pretense, Jim Marshbank, John T. Stevenson, Jim Cullen, Ted Kennedy, Arthur Ryan, Harry Newbound, Percy Pitt, Henry White, Roop Bradley, Bob Boyle, Jimmy Gaynor, Pat Pally, Sam Marin, Albert Gurley, Eddie Prescott, Ernie Ashton, Billy Payne, Charlie Hammond, George Johnson, Jim Kennedy, Bert Park, Edgar Humans, Rod McGregor, Bill McVeigh, Alfie Sharp, Les Abbott, George McCart, Jim Slater, George Blake, Frank Kane, Fred Hewitt, Norm Clark, Archie McNeil, Albie Engelman, Martin Gotts, Bill Frank, Alex Lang, Doug Gillespie, Alex Johnston, Dick Harris, we know Dick Harris, Jack Grant, Jack Hammond, Les Beck, Fred Jinks, and Andy Kennedy, Albert Bickford, Harvey Gibson, Ike Little, William Harry, Charlie Medway, Bill Hickey, Frank Williams, Vin Gardner, Dave Gillespie, Harvey Kelly, Horry Pierce, Alf Wheeler, Ernie Kelly, Wally Kuchu, Bill Laver, Bill Carmotti, Bill Marchbank, Andy Patterson, Alex Barningham, George Rennick, George Stewart, Jack Bickay, Jim Nayland, Ernie Jameson, Ray Ritchie, Tom Clancy, Andy McDonald, Andy O'Donnell, Jack Wells, Bill Goddard, Percy Sheehan, Les Batty, Jim Chernilty, Doug Fraser, Charlie Hay, Claude Cornish, Reuben Holland, Jack Bristow, Jack Macy, Tom McCluskey, Archie Wilson, Ned Bowden, Bruce Campbell, Tom Hanson, Roy Johnson, Harry Matheson, Charlie Taylor, Les Rowe, Viv Valentine, Herbert Koch, Gordon Green, Billy Dick, Cock and Dick, shit. Henry Jane, Bert Cowley, Tom Hughes, Fred Marriott, John Gunter, Fen McDonald, George Chalice, Jim Stewart, Frank Triplett, Harry Horton, Bill Johnson, Alf Williamson, Herman Bartlett, Richard Moran, Jack Laughlin, Charles Rauber, Eric Cochran, Paddy Mills, Wally Gibbons, Paddy O'Brien, Alf Board, Dave Earsman, Chris Cameron, Bill Rogers, Justin McCarthy, Pat Ryan, Harry Curtis, Athol Sharp, Harold Evans, Frank Hanna, Wally Don, Les Starr, Ted Brown, Percy Dakin, Arthur Harrison, Dan Keeley, Steve Lehane, Jim Willis, George Colwell, Charlie Fisher, Herb Burley, Jack Lowe, Joe Andrew, Bill Cook, Albert Scadden, Stan McKenzie, Jimmy Morris, Bill Hoare, Joey Shortell, Billy Robinson, Vic Gordon, George Moore, Mick Dunn, Alf Huggett, George White, Charlie Cannett, Ernest Carter, Harry Greaves, Robert White, Frank Rigoldi, Lyle Downs, Willis Hardy, Darcy Lear, Frank Martin, Jack Greenhill, Dave Crone, Phil McCumsky, Corey White, Ern Cowley, Fred Johnson, Jack Keeley, Leo Tasker, Percy Jackson, Harry Fernald, Jack Worley, Jim Ho, Bill Koski, Frank Mercevich, Ray Stewart, Bert Borromeo, Newton Chandler, Maury Owens, Bert Graff, Jack Scobie, Joey Prince, Les Kettle, and Stuart McLatchy. That's the 1920s. We're up to 1920s. I'm sorry, this is taking so long for you guys. I'm sorry. Wow. Why does this take so long? I can't do this. I'm going to try this again another day, because today's just not the day. I'm sorry. I just can't. I'm sorry, but I'm just getting tired, and I'll probably do this another time when I have the time to do it, but today's not the day. Request any challenges you want in the comments of this stream. Yeah, I'm just going to end this stream because I'm just too tired. I can't keep this up. I will see